Here at Marquette University, we have so many amazing scholars researching, writing, and teaching about gender issues. And these gender scholars work in a wide range of areas and disciplines from across our campus. Recognizing this, the Institute for Women's Leadership is excited to announce the launch of our Research Spotlight series. Our goal for the series is to highlight some of the wonderful gender-related research being done on campus and with partners beyond its borders. Each month, we will showcase one scholar in a recorded video discussion. And during these discussions, we will hear about their research and the sometimes personal stories that led to it. I think you'll find these conversations as enlightening as I did, and I do hope that you'll tune in. So thank you for joining us for part 2 of our Spotlight series with Noelle Brigden. If you haven't had a chance to check out part 1, I really encourage you to do so. Yeah, well, I think that's just absolutely incredible. So you actually found this as really a newfound strategy and really espoused in really, gender roles, which I just think is just incredible. And this may answer my next question, but what's the most important or most surprising finding that you have found throughout all of your research? And what was it like? And it could revolve around about your findings around gender, but what did you feel like when you came across this finding?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to think of sort of one finding
Mhm.
um, that for me kind of captures
Sure.
that career of field work.
Yeah.
I think what I'd like to put in the middle of this conversation too is that I don't just ask questions about gender and how the experience of bodies and borders are structured by gender, which they very much are, but that my methods have to be structured and acknowledge gender too. And this has been something that I have been increasingly trying to deepen in my own research over time. I was clearly aware of it at the beginning, but as I go through the practice of taking field notes and kind of reflection on all of these experiences, it becomes ever more clear to me that my fieldwork relationships are structured by gender, uh, and that I, in turn, am being restructured by those fieldwork relationships all the time.
Mm.
And I think that there's a I have a more profound recognition of the fact that I write in order to justify the types of social transformations that I see happening through my fieldwork all the time. That those relationships themselves, the very act of what we call data collection for me, is part of the impact I have on the world. The relationships that I can form with people across borders, across identities, change both of us, all of us. And I just all the time have a deeper appreciation that it's not just an ends to a mean. I mean, it's not just a means to an end, but an end in itself. And so this new project, I think, is really a reflection of that. The fact that it merges so seamlessly with an outreach project.
So could you speak just a little bit more to that? How has your data method strategies been refined through your reflection and understanding of that really, through these relationship building through your data collection? How has that impacted the way that you've collected data?
So I think more than anything, it impacts the types of questions that I ask. So you
Mhm.
can see it through the drift in my research agenda
Sure.
most clearly. Um, so I think that's a major part of it. I think I also have begun over time to start recognizing silences and blind spots in the data I collect, and that attention to gender really helps me do that.
Speak a little bit more to this nonprofit program that you've started and you spoke to just a second ago. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, so this is called now Pesas y Poder. We are about to launch our website. And the idea of it is to promote gender equity, empowerment, and healing from trauma through the practice of powerlifting. And We see this as an intergenerational program. We welcome all genders, recognizing that gender for everyone causes vulnerabilities and resources. So I talked before about how the young men in the communities oftentimes are viewed as threats by police or competing gangs, and they too have sedentary lifestyles as a result of that. Women are more frequently dying of diabetes than bullets in these communities. And we are working on creating spaces that are safe for LGBTQ folks as well in this context. A space where men can talk about their vulnerabilities in the gym setting, and where women can spot men and vice versa. So we're working on creating some of that. And it's currently closed for COVID. And one of the benefits of having a community gym is that the community can decide when it's safe to reopen, as opposed to responding to a sort of profit necessity. And so we are preparing to relaunch it post-COVID and try to extend to other communities to incorporate them.
So this is one single location in El Salvador?
So I've worked in 2 locations. We
Okay.
have one that has a gym that we have founded, and in cooperation with the community organizing committee. So we're working in a space that has a sort of backbone and tradition of grassroots organizing, going back quite a long way, which helps us do this collaboratively, as opposed to sort of coming in out of the blue. And so we've been working with them with this gym in one location. In another location, I've partnered with a nonprofit organization that does women's empowerment, reaching out to their members and then bringing them to gyms, to commercial gyms for training. And we sponsored a women's category at one of the local powerlifting events, and we were able to bring a team of intergenerational team of grandmother, daughter, and to the powerlifting event for their first meet.
Wow, that's incredible. And so are these participants that you and individuals that you will essentially track through their progression and really take an assessment of where they are, make sure that you're recording some of their stories, some past traumas, and then to look at how their experiences over time are impacting their well-being?
Yeah, so the goal here is to put together a research team that's going to do this, but not only to focus on individual measures, but to look at the broader impacting community. So one of the questions I have is, can this kind of programming impact not only the people who actually do the rituals in the gym, the practices, but broader notions about the value of women's bodies and about what strength looks like? So I will be conducting research that looks at the development of images of strength in El Salvador from the Civil War period through the War on Terror and the War on Gangs. And I will then also do work in the community where we do kind of mapping of our bodies and body imagery, and trying to do a sort of ethnographic storytelling with people about how they understand their own bodies. So in addition to the research that we'd like to sponsor that tracks individuals, we want to look at community.
Sure. Yeah. And that seems like a really, another interesting way of collecting data when you're trying to look to see at a societal shift in the perception of some of these constructs that you're looking at. So just to speak to that a little bit, can you explain, how you're doing that? Are you doing that through interviews and conversations? And are you also providing some education to see if whether or not there's an impact of that education over time?
Yeah, so again, this is nascent. This is in the beginning stage.
Yeah, which is so exciting.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So I will be conducting the ethnography through interviews, through mapping workshops and art workshops as well, which builds on the methods that I have used to understand borders and the migration route, where I had people doing mapping and art workshops for those projects. But now I'm going to focus on their body. And so I will be doing that. I have a professor of social work who's going to come down and do some storytelling work as well around the project. And then we would like to do intake and outtake kinds of surveys over time to look at the more individual level impact for the people who are actually participating in the program. We have not started that yet, but the plan is to get going over the summer, depending on COVID safety.
COVID safety. Yeah. So, my next question, you pretty much summed it up, which is where's your next process of discovery? And I'm assuming that this project of yours is really where that takes you. So is your plan to then relocate over the summer, as long, dependent upon COVID? And so do you take your family with you? Is that, and how long do you expect, what is that process like for you as you relocate for a while to see out this project?
So in the past, I've taken my family with me for long field work trips. My son has been dragged through El Salvador for a year, through Mexico for a year, and on and on. I took my daughter with me last summer to field work on the Borders project in the community where I plan to return to. Neither of my children want to ever travel with me again. They are done. Perhaps if I book them a luxury cruise, they'll consider it, but field work is just too hot. It's too hard. They are done. They have made it abundantly clear. I think at one point my daughter looked up at me very angry last summer, and she said, "This is not a vacation." She was 7. Yeah. So they, at one point we had last summer a car accident, and she had to go to the hospital overnight. There were arguments with police that I had over the culpability for the accident.
Oh, no.
She was under observation in the ER and so on in El Salvador. And I was trying to make light of it. And I said, this is the great thing about traveling for field work. It's always an adventure. You never know where you're going to end up. You could sleep anywhere. And she looked up at me and she said, "Mother, it's the middle of the night. I do not want an adventure." And so I don't think they're going back. So at this point, it's very painful, but I have to just accept the separation.
Sure. Yeah.
When I work on migration issues, and so I do interviews with mothers who haven't seen their children in decades,
Right.
or separated from their children by a border. And in these communities, there is no one that has not been separated from their family as a result of migration or imprisonment. And so it helps keep that into context for me, that my separation is relatively small and painless and privileged by comparison.
How amazing for your children to have experienced what they already have experienced. And likely, you've already set the seed, you've already planted, and shown them what it's like in other societies. So I think that's just incredible. So just a couple more questions for you. Can you speak to specifically just how has your research had a real personal impact on you?
Yeah, I can't summarize that neatly because it's so profound. When I think about even the shape of my body, I mean, it was through my research that I came to lifting weights as a way of coping with that research. And so if I look over time at the images of myself moving through my field work, the times where I missed so many meals working in a migrant shelter and nonstop, to then the lifting, and then incorporating the lifting into my field work, down to even the body I inhabit is completely shaped by these experiences at this point. Who I am as a mother. And that's what I invited. That was the whole point of doing any of this, was to allow that to shape my family and my life. And the lifting is just one example of that. And I can show you the tattoos another time.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's just becoming a part of who you are, and it has just evolved over time. It's a part of your own identity, which is just, I'm just so in awe of your research. Can you just, I'm just really interested in too. can you explain a little bit so where will you be staying? So when you go you go for a year or 6 months, where do you live, and how is that different from your living situation now?
Okay, so it's also changed over time. So when I first started going to the field, I was very poor as a grad student. And I also was deeply committed to living alongside in the same conditions as the people that I was working with in my research who were participating in the interviews. And so I lived in a rural community in El Salvador for a time, and then I lived in a migrant shelter. I dropped my husband decided that he was unwilling to live in a migrant shelter with my young son. And so I dropped them off at the beach, and I would go back on like an overnight bus every couple of weeks and visit them and then go back to the shelter. But I would, sleep on the floor with everybody else in the shelter until we got beds a few months later, and then and travel the route. But now I find I do spend nights oftentimes in the community where I'm working. But as I get older and I'm more familiar with the work that I'm doing, and I'm in a little bit more privileged position personally, I do keep an apartment in a nice kind of upscale part of town where I can retreat to write and think and have some personal space.
Sure.
Oftentimes in the communities where I work, there is no such thing as space. You're kind of constantly performing. So there is no privacy. So I do make space for myself now for a little bit more luxury than I ever would have accepted when I was in my youth. And I attribute it to aging, and with aging, having a bit of common sense. So I remember at one point, because at one point I was working along the migration route with a group that were going to take a very dangerous part of the passage where there had been a lot of robberies on foot. And I wanted to go with them, travel with them through this particular trail. And I thought that I would have to convince them, being a woman with a group of men, that I wouldn't slow them down, that I could keep up, that I was tough. And they looked at me and they said, "What are you playing at? I mean, look at you. You have good nutrition. You haven't been beat up already or harmed." And they showed me scars on their bodies. They were emaciated from hunger from even before they left on this treacherous journey. And they said, "You're not going to experience what we experience." There was some doubt that they could keep up with me as a result of me coming in with the privilege that I have to go in and out of these situations. And so they sat me down and they said, "Noelia, what do you really expect to learn from that?" And I was like, "You know what, you're right." And so that's another way that I see myself as evolving, is that I've also come to recognize my own machismo that's internalized, that
Sure.
drives me in so many different ways. And so when I think about how I live in the field now, I do take space and time and comfort that I didn't take when I initially started. And a lot of that has to do with the recognition that no matter how close I get, I will never really walk in the shoes of other people. And that my push to do that might actually have a source that perhaps is less honorable than I sometimes like to admit.
Well,
It
it's definitely
shouldn't
honorable.
be,
I would actually put it in the honorable category, but I completely understand.
it just shouldn't be adventure tourism, I think, is the bottom line.
Right,
The adventure tourism.
right. Well, those are incredible. Those are incredible stories. I do have one more question for you, and this is just to go along with really the theme of the pursuit of the IWL. So just, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing women today, just in general?
So I wouldn't want to generalize to all women, but I think that is in itself the challenge, is that we have to continue to come to terms with the intersections of our oppressions, with class, with ableism, with fat shaming, with racism, with classism. That is the real challenge, is to build solidarity across those borders. So my incapacity to generalize the advice for everyone is exactly where I think the challenge lies. And I forgot to answer your question about the education. One of the ideas of the gym space is to also create a space where we can talk about people's bodies, you know, in ways that aren't always allowed in other spaces. And I figured out that we could do this because I had always assumed that body image problems were a woman's problem or a woman's issue. I mean, I know that there's a literature out there on men and masculinity and in terms of body image issues. But personally, it just had always felt like a woman's issue.
Wow.
And when I started powerlifting, and not necessarily even just in El Salvador, but in the US, men started talking to me like a bro in the context of the gym. Like we could speak the transnational language of the bro in a way that wasn't sexualized. And I began to hear from men stories that I had never heard in my whole life in other contexts that had to do with their own discomfort living in their body. And I realized, both as a mother of a teenage son and then listening to these stories, how profound the disciplining on men and the shaming of men, profound but different than for women. And so part of the idea of the gym is to create a space where men can talk about that disciplining and vulnerability as well as women. So it's not only women having that engagement. I mean, it's fine to teach women or affirm their assertiveness with lifting, but unless we can get to the men, that doesn't change the structure.
Sure.
So it was really, so the idea of creating a space for education in that way through the gym, where the gym itself can be a place where conversations bubble up. That's part of that. So when you asked about that, I forgot to answer you, but it really was, I guess, a really shocking and surprising, not research finding, but sort of personal finding that I came to by entering the gym community. And the type of camaraderie I felt with men in the gym goes well beyond what I felt I had access to as a woman in the military in the 90s. And I don't know if society has changed or if my body has changed enough with aging and lifting that it gives me access to a different way of relating to men. But I, for much of my youth, wanted so desperately to be treated as a bro in the context of the Army. I wanted to be one of the brotherhood.
Sure.
And suddenly I find that in the gym, I have a bit more access to this kind of egalitarian relationships that I can form with men. That's not to say that there isn't all sorts of sexual harassment and things that go on for women in the gym. There's a lot. But personally, I've found ways to negotiate that weren't open to me as a younger woman. And I oftentimes wonder if that is a larger social change over the course of my lifetime, or if just I have changed my position. And so at any rate, so this idea of like creating a space for the gym to be an educational space and a space for conversation, I think is really interesting.
It's almost like you can't decouple it. So you have that physical aspect of what you're doing. And then there's also the educational piece to inform people to create this change. You know, I'm really curious though, in terms of gender roles. So versus, you know, US versus Central America, do you see that they're pretty similar, or do you see that they're more traditional in you know, Central America still, or you know, we're more progressive in the States? How do you see that difference?
So I think that the important thing for people to recognize is that we're one society, first off. I mean, we like to pretend like El Salvador is separate from the United States, but if you look at the fact that we have been de facto socially integrated by migration for decades, not to mention media and politics, we are part of one society. So it's sort of not them or us, we're part of a continuum, a social continuum. I think that there are differences in the way violence is experienced and the way gender is experienced in those spaces. But those experiences are not separated. That the power dynamics that unfold in the United States and how they intersect with US foreign policy, with class, with racism, with US imperialism, are intertwined with the experience of gender in El Salvador. So if there are differences in those experiences, it's because they're at different locations within the same whole, not different societies.
Sure. Yeah, that's incredibly interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anybody really articulate it like that. So that's incredibly interesting. So how long will you be gone over the summer? I mean,
I,
are you the
oh,
plan?
I am going on sabbatical. I am gone. I will be there. I will be there. I'm going to finish up this Borders project while I'm down there and launch this other one. And even if I can't reopen the gym, I can still launch the research onto kind of body images of strength more broadly,
Sure.
and continue to lay foundations by building networks that support the gym. So I will be gone as soon as my students are done in spring semester.
Wow.
And
Yes.
I will come back in September to visit my son for his birthday, and then I will be gone again. and then
Oh
I
my goodness.
then I will come back for the holidays and be gone again. I am so excited.
So you'll have a year sabbatical.
So
Oh wow.
this whole year is going to be working on this new project. I am,
Oh, that's incredible.
and I can't wait to share it with you, Jenica. So
Well,
I
that's
would
what I was
love.
going to say. Let me know when you have some preliminary findings or anything that you want to share with the Marquette community, and we'll bring you back. And because that would be, incredible, because everybody is, on the tip, edge of their seat wanting to learn about what you're learning. So I think that would be just awesome.
I would love that. I've got this edited volume that we've been working on. I will come back in the fall. We have a workshop at Notre Dame scheduled for our edited volume. It's called Strong as Feminist. And it's an intersectional feminist examination of the increased popularity of strength sports and increased diversity of strength sports globally in the current political moment. And so we're trying to embed the question of why and how female participants in strength sports understand feminism in diverse ways,
Sure.
and in the context of their participation in that sport. And so we have an interdisciplinary group of scholars. We have a workshop scheduled at Notre Dame that's been postponed due to COVID, but to the fall. And I'm a co-editor on that. And my own contribution to that is going to be a chapter on steroid use and masculinity in El Salvador.
Really? How that is so interesting. And so to learn more about that, so have you already collected the data, or have you already understand what the structure of that chapter will be, or is that something you're going to also be doing during your sabbatical?
So I'll also be working in that on my sabbatical as well. So
Sure.
I have a sort of structure of the chapter based on participant observation in the gyms, but I would like to conduct formal interviews to sort of flesh out the thesis a bit more.
Sure. Oh my goodness, that's so incredible. You are just doing amazing work. I mean, I have to say, compared to other people when I, learn about their research, and of course, all of it is interesting, but I mean, you're putting yourself right in the middle of what your research is. You're becoming part of it. It's hard to detach you from what you're doing. And it's just incredible. It's just absolutely incredible work. So I am just so in awe of what you're doing. It was such an amazing conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your groundbreaking research and amazing experiences. And thank you all for joining us. And we hope that you'll keep an eye out and join us for our next episode.